Welcome to Ask a Naturalist with the Harris Center for Conservation Education. I'm Susie Spickle, the Community Programs Director and one of the naturalists here. And I'm just going to ask staff to introduce themselves.
My name's Brett Thielen. I'm the Science Director at the Harris Center. And at Ask a Naturalist, I tend to answer questions about amphibians and sometimes reptiles.
That's great. And Phil, how about next?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Phil Brown. I'm the Bird Conservation Director at the Harris Center, and yeah, as you may have suspected, I will talk a little bit about birds tonight, but happy to chime in on other areas of interest.
Thanks, Phil. And introducing our newest staff member, Nate. Tell us a bit about yourself and what your specialties are.
Hi, I'm Nate. I'm an ecologist here at the Harris Center. I work really closely with Brett and Phil in our conservation research department. I know the most about birds and plants, but I'm just a general nature nerd. I love all taxa, so amphibians and the like. So I might chime in at any moment. And yeah, this is my first Ask a Naturalist, so I'm excited to be part of it.
Yay, thanks, Nate. And last but not least, I'm going to ask Jeremy to introduce himself.
Hey everyone, I'm Jeremy Wilson. I'm the director at the Harris Center. I'm a little sweaty right now. I apologize. I forgot this was Thursday night and was out shoveling snow. So, um, I guess my brain will get back into it pretty quickly. I usually answer questions about trees.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'm sure there's a few other Harris Center staff here, but we're going to get going. And I want to thank all of you for showing up. Before we get started, I just want to remind people a little bit about the Harris Center. The Harris Center is all about helping people of all ages from all walks of life find connection to our natural world. And we do this a couple of different ways. One is through education, where we work in schools around the region and have events like this. Conservation science is another thing. You might have heard about our wonderfully successful salamander crossing brigade, which has been crossing salamanders for almost 20 years. And since then, they've crossed over 85,000 amphibians, which is really remarkable. And that's just one amazing project from conservation science. And of course, land protection, where we work hard to keep the Monadnock region a place where wild animals can roam and people have areas to explore, with over 36,000 acres of protected lands that are out there. So we're going to get started. I just want to say we get a lot of Ask a Naturalist entries, and we try to choose ones that we can best identify and also that vary. So it's not all mammal scat, which would be exciting for me since I love mammals and talk a lot about mammals. So if you send something in, you don't see it here tonight, that doesn't mean it won't show up in another Ask a Naturalist. We've just curated this so it's in a balance. So our first question tonight is, if you hold a bluebird wing or tail feather up to the light, what color is it and why? And this came from our very own Mead Cadeau from Hancock, New Hampshire. And Phil and Nate, what do you got to say about this?
Well, sure, I'll get started with that. I just happen to be holding a bluebird feather at this moment, so very strangely here, I have a bluebird feather in my hand. Um, Also a blue jay feather for comparison. You find a lot more blue jay feathers in the woods. They're often found in kill sites, and they have a pretty distinctive white tip on the wing feathers a lot of the time. But this bluebird feather, I happen to collect this one at the site of a kill in my own backyard a few years ago, where a Cooper's hawk had taken out the male bluebird that was nesting here. But yeah, indeed, you might see a little bit of blue at this particular angle. Um, However, if I turn this feather and put it in different light, it might appear a little bit more grayish. Just trying to find the sweet spot here. Um, and that is because blue is not a true color that's produced by pigment like the feathers um, of other colored birds. So blue is different in the bird world as far as coloration goes. So red and yellow and oranges are derived mainly from pigments. So you might think of an oriole or a cardinal in your backyard as having pigments that have come from carotenoids, the foods basically that these birds are eating. Think of flamingos. Why are they pink? They they've been eating shrimp, which produces these carotenoids, which are passed through to the colors and give them that pigmentation. But in nature, blue is a very rare color. So blue is a structural color in bird feathers, and that's produced because of the protein molecules, the arrangement of the protein molecules and keratin. So the structure of the feather is actually slightly different, and it's the way that the light reflects that produces the blue coloration, not actually from the pigments. So in actuality, there's a lot more gray coloration in a bluebird feather. There is one way that I know of that birds express blue coloration, and it's the feet of the blue-footed booby. Upon a little bit of research, I found that the blue-footed booby derives some coloration from pigment, but expresses it not in its feathers, only in its feet. This is a southern seabird that's quite famous in a lot of depictions, and it has colorful blue feet. If it stops eating its usual food source, the feet won't be blue anymore. So very interesting. But yeah, getting back to the feathers though, the blue light is reflected by the crystalline structure of these feathers in feathers that are expressed as blue, and apparently blue eyes are the same thing. It has to do more with structures of of whatever it is in our eyes that's making people express blue eyes.
What?
So the answer is that.
Blue eyes too?
Yeah.
Wow,
I don't
Phil.
know if
You
Nate
don't
has
this
anything to add.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Nate, do you have anything you would like to add to this?
Yeah, I'll just say there's a number of other examples of iridescence of bird feathers. I think mallards are probably one that everyone can relate to. When they turn their heads, they can appear almost black in color, but when the light hits it, they're that brilliant green color. And another just really subtle one you might see sometimes in the fall and early winter are buffleheads. They look like they have, black and white on the head, the males, but if the light catches it right, it's this beautiful purpley oil kind of color. So light really interacts with feathers in really interesting ways.
Love it. Thank you, Nate. You don't think this impacts that bluebirds are the bluebirds of happiness, do you?
Hmm.
Oh my
The
God.
gray birds of happiness. No.
Great birds of happiness. Oh, Phil, this is you. It says a misconnection. Who was here? Phil, tell us a little bit about where you found this and yeah, what
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
set the
January.
scene.
Let's see. I'm trying to remember the particular spot. It was probably in my backyard, but yeah, what I saw here was two different sets of tracks crossing each other, and I just thought it might make an interesting question for some of the mammal-oriented people in the group.
Sure.
Um, and it was light, fluffy snow for what that's worth.
I love it. I can take this one as the mammal-y person interested in mammals, and I love this picture. The tracks are so clear that you can really see some morphological differences. So if you look at the inset, the tracks that are traveling up the screen are very rounded. Miles, if you point to the one on the bottom, it's a really good example of it. They don't show any claws. It's a beautiful rounded print. It's got no nails showing, and that heel pad looks like a little mountain in there. And whenever I see a track that's this very rounded shape with no claws showing, traveling in this sort of straight walking line, I'm going to go right to the cat family. Because there's no scale in this picture, I'm going to ask Phil about how big were those tracks?
Yeah, I often do take photos with scale, but I thought this one would be an interesting challenge without it. These were probably maybe 2 inches in length, maybe two across, something like that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So too big to be a house cat.
Mhm.
So house cats have really small feet. Next time you are near your cat, if you have a cat or you're out and um, at a place with cats, take a look at their feet. They're pretty tiny, so they're going to be a lot smaller than 2 inches. So this is probably the symbol of the Harris Center, an old bobcat out for a walk. And traveling across it, where they crisscross, is another type of track. And I feel like, yeah, Miles is pointing at it. I feel like the best one right there, Miles, stay right down low. I feel like that's a really good track to look at, because if you kind of look at that, if you can look, maybe you have to do a squinty eye, but in the center of the track is sort of the raised letter X. And that's the negative space of the claw, of the foot coming down, not the claw, but the whole foot. It's sort of where the snow went in. And whenever I see the raised letter X, I think X marks the spot for the canine family. So I'm thinking this is a wild canine. It's not one of a domestic dog. And one of the ways you can tell the difference is that beautiful straight line walking. It's so straight. Their feet are lining up. The front foot and the back foot are going in the same spot. With our domestic dogs, they've lived with humans for 10,000 years or more, and they're a little bit wider, and their feet don't often line up that much. And based on the fact that it's smaller than the bobcat, it's hard for me to see the distinguishing characteristics between the two foxes that we have. It is either a red fox or a gray fox. Gray fox are typically smaller than red fox, but it's hard for me to tell. Gray fox has a very distinctive heel pad, and I can't quite make that out. Let's see what's next for Ask a Naturalist. Oh, this is very exciting. This is a turn the tables question where we're going to show you a picture.
It's a poll.
It's a poll. We're going to ask you what species this is, and you're going to get to respond to our poll. All right, Miles, we got it. There's the animal. Here are our choices. Number 1, a beaver, an otter, a muskrat, or a raccoon dog. Okay. Take a moment. You want to give the results, Miles? Give us a report.
Sure. Everybody's thinking this is a beaver with 84%, and then lower percentages with the otter and the muskrat. The muskrat was at 11%.
Well, I really wanted Miles to cue some music when I respond to this, but everybody who's thinking about this animal can see that it's a mammal and it's in the water, so it's semi-aquatic or aquatic, and we've got beaver, otter, or muskrat as our choices. But I want to encourage everybody to look at the back end of this animal and notice that it is not showing something that would normally register if it was a beaver, and that is the big flat tail. You typically can see that streaming out behind the animal. And this is hard to tell because it has a similar look to it, but this is actually a little muskrat. And I wanted Miles to play Muskrat Love by Captain Antonio, which mentions Muskrat Susie, which I think made me fall in love with muskrats when I was a kid.
You're welcome to sing it, Susie.
Now people would close their Zoom down fast, but this is a muskrat, and muskrats are really amazing smaller rodents that live in the wetlands just like beavers, but they're smaller. They're about 20 inches, and out of that 20 inches from the snout to the end of the tail, 9 inches of that is typically the tail. So their body is pretty small, and they have a rat-like tail, but they're not closely related to rats. They're more closely related to voles, which is kind of cool. And at this time of the year, in the wintertime, muskrats make little they make like ice shacks or ice shanties near a hole where they're feeding. They will pile up a whole bunch of cattails and then gnaw out the center of it and hang out above the hole eating. So they have their own little ice shanty while they're out feeding on the ice. So this is a muskrat, but good job, everybody. It was hard to tell. It was a little bit of a trick question. I just want to add one other. I went on a muskrat journey today, and something that I just think is very sweet, something you can think of tonight when you get in your bed. Muskrats, especially ones that have bank houses or bank lodges. They can dig right in. Inside, there can be up to 15 little muskrats all snuggled up together, which is very cozy. So tonight, when you're going to bed, hum yourself a little muskrat love song and think about the 15 muskrats that are snuggled up. Okay. Here's a great question. Would anyone at the Harris Center be able to identify what the story is in the following three photos? I went out a few days ago in the morning and these tracks were there. So that's the first set. Everybody take a good look. Here's the second. Some exciting clues in the second one, and here's the last, and here's what Rebecca thinks. I assume it was a large bird of prey. See my boots for size of wings. Great job, Rebecca, putting in some scale. That met a land critter and lifted it straight up. Agreed? And if so, could it have been a beaver that got lifted up? Thanks, Rebecca. Well, I think two good people to turn this over to is Nate and Phil. Can you help us decipher this mystery?
Sure, I'll take a start with that. Yeah, this was perplexing initially, I'll say. It certainly looks like there could be two different stories going on here, two different animals moving. Um, Obviously, we see the wing marks on the left, wings and some sort of body drag, or maybe some tail feathers in the drag itself. So, something that flapped a few times to get out of the snow or into the snow. So that's the question. Um, where's the big plop if it went into the snow? It was something that jumped out to me. And then looking at those other tracks, I don't know if we can go back to that. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some clues in here as far as who made this. First of all, is it a bird or a mammal? I think that's worthy to ask that question initially. I'm not seeing any sort of body drag. I'm seeing some side by side footprints of something that was probably not moving in a way like the fox or the bobcat. These are very short strides that this animal is taking, and there seems to be a right foot, left foot scenario, a drag mark. So, I have a thought that this is the same individual that we're seeing rather than something coming in for prey. But, that's the obvious temptation to say something was coming in to grab this other set of tracks. Nate, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add there, and then we can continue to figure it out.
No, I think that's a good thought. I mean, with the fact that this could have been like a site where a bird was grabbing a mammal or something like that, it's interesting to not see any evidence of that on the ground here. Um, but yeah, it is pretty interesting, the takeoff radius and all that sort of thing as well.
Yeah, we so often see birds take off from the ground, and maybe we can make some observations about how large they are, how many times they flap before they get off the ground. So, this bird to me, I'm thinking since I'm not thinking that this landed in the snow to grab something, rather it was going the other direction. Um, but yeah, curious to hear if Susie has some other thoughts, and I have a guess about who it was after that. But
You guys are really right on the spot. Usually, if I see a bird of prey kill site, I don't see the bird take off with its prey right off. I typically will kind of defer or defeather the animal and eat it there because it's heavy to fly away. So it's usually I come across, if I'm lucky enough to find a kill site where a bird of prey took an animal, there's a lot of messy evidence left behind. Nate and Phil, would you agree with that for bird of prey behavior in this area?
yeah, I'd say so. And it's even if not that, at least maybe some sort of plop into the snow where the grab was made. I did happen to see owl marks that went into the snow the other day, and noticed that it plunged in. I didn't see any obvious kill, but there was more of a body plunge. And this way, I think we would have seen more of that if it were going that direction. So Yeah, so definitely something large, a big bird, that's coming out in the other direction. I'm curious to go back to the toe drag photo here. Maybe the other one, Miles. Thanks. Yeah. So this to me kind of has a little bit of a hooked pattern. It's not quite obvious to to say which way this animal is even going in this case, but you might see a little bit of a leg drag. I'm noticing that this was something that was above the powdery snow that was moving through the snow, not in a way like a big heavy-bodied mammal might make barrel a path right through the snow, but in a more delicate way of just dragging its very slight legs through the snow, because there's that path, that very sinuous snake-like path of snow in the middle of the feet that is undisturbed still. So um, it seemed like this bird was moving to me in the direction toward where it took off from. That's my guess. And I'm gonna say it was a corvid based on that kind of hooked pattern of the feet. They tend to walk a little pigeon-toed, and watching birds like ravens and crows on the ground. I've realized ravens are heavier bodied. It takes them a few flaps to get off the ground. I think a crow would probably shoot up off the ground a lot quicker. And then maybe there's another bird that comes to mind for some folks, and it's usually more of a linear track pattern where one foot is in front of the other that we see a lot during the winter. Well, two birds really. We see a lot of turkeys that have that pattern, which have a bigger foot and walking one foot in front of the other. This was kind of legs side by side, and the other smaller one would be a ruffed grouse. But I think with the side by side legs, I would go with a corvid here and probably the bigger corvid. I don't know. Nate, Susie, you have any other thoughts?
Giving you 2 thumbs up, Phil. Yeah,
Okay,
sounds
that's
good.
good.
Thank you.
Yeah, that one took me a
Very
while though. That was to figure out what was going on. It's great to have a few photos to look at. I think just having one, I would be tempted to say, yeah, I could see that a bird came in and picked up an animal. But good to see the whole story out. Follow the tracks.
When in doubt, follow it out, as Mead Kiddo would always say. All right, thanks, Rebecca, for sending in such a great series. Okay, this is from Emily in Peterborough. Following an otter trail last weekend, I came across several round black holes in the ice pictured alongside with their trail on the next slide. And the question is, how do otters start and then expand the holes? Do they make holes from above or below the ice? Do they maintain the holes to keep them open? And do other animals access or use these holes for drinking water and other purposes? Let's see the other slide too. All right, here we go. I love this question. So thank you, Emily. This was really fun. These are classic otter tracks with the slide. So you can sort of see the 2 feet together and then the body slide. And then these holes, and right around the holes, if you kind of look, there's some footprints, very ottery footprints. And yes, indeed, otters do make holes. They must have holes to access the water. They must be able to get into the water. So if they're not near a river or a stream and they're on a lake or a marsh, they need to get a way in. And so a lot of times they don't make the hole from above. The hole is made from underneath and they push up. And I actually had to do a little bit of research on this. So thank you for getting me to do some investigation. This information I'm about to share comes from an old Harris Center naturalist named Mike Bottini. Mike is a wildlife biologist now in Long Island. He's been a Harris Center speaker on otters. He's an expert on otters and runs a otter survey program out on Long Island, which is really cool. And he has a whole guidebook to identifying otter sign. And this otter sign he calls the push-up. So the way that they do it is from under the water. They're going to find the parts of the ice that are the thinnest, kind of where the springs might be feeding in, or where maybe some other animal had made a hole, and they're going to push up from underneath with their head And the reason they need to come out of the water is otters, although they're semi-aquatic, they can't stay under the water that long. They can stay up to about 2 to 3, maybe 4 minutes at the max. So they always need to have a way to get out of the water and get a breath of fresh air. Plus, if they catch a really big fish, they don't eat it in the water. They'll come up and eat it on the ice nearby. So these holes are very important. They also make use of holes made by other animals, particularly beavers. And this is a good time of year if you have a beaver pond near you to go looking for out to the beaver pond where beavers have keep holes open and see if you can find any otter sign or mink sign around them as well, which is pretty cool. So that's the story about that. That was a really great question. And I should mention too that since I went on deep dive on muskrats, muskrats also make holes a similar way, but they don't use their head. Instead, they use their little rodent teeth and they gnaw the hole. So how would you know the difference between a muskrat hole, a beaver hole, and an otter hole? Well, one way is the otter's making it from below, and a lot of times there's a rim around the hole. And if you look at this slide, you can kind of see there's a rim from this hole. And that's, if you could just imagine the head of the otter pushing up, causing the ice to break and form this rim around it, which is really, really cool. So yay to otters. And thanks for sending in that great question and series of slides. Okay, oh boy, I love this picture. Phil, I love it. Maybe, Phil, can you just tell us about this picture before I read the question?
Yeah. Yeah, this was so cool. You never really expect to see a bear, but this was during wild cherry season. This bear is in a black cherry tree, and bears will create these little nests in the late summer when the cherries are ripe, and bend back the branches, sit up in a tree, and feed on all the ripe or semi-ripe black cherries. And they do the same thing with beech trees later on when the beech nuts are ready to be eaten. So I just happened to be walking in Dublin at the Rotary Park, really close to Route 101, and out looking for birds or something, and just looked up and there was this big black thing in the tree, and it was snoozing. It was I certainly did not want to wake this little bear up. I imagine it was a yearling. It was kind of on the smaller side, but it was so neat. So I took a photo through my scope. That's why there's a little circle in there. I didn't get too close to it.
Love it. And this is a great question. Do wild animals dream while they are dreaming like domestic animals with feet and nose twitching and making noise? If yes, who studies this and how, and what have they learned? This is also from Emily. And Emily, I got to say, I love this question because before I turn it over to Nate, who's got the answer to it, I did hear an article recently about spiders and spiders dreaming, and scientists were able to figure this out that spiders have REM sleep or REM sleep because they studied like the eye movement of the spiders while they were resting. And ever since then, I have been wondering if the spiders in my house are dreaming about having a nightmare about me and my vacuum. And so I haven't vacuumed any spiders up in my house since then, which I feel really proud about. I don't want them to have nightmares about me. But Nate went on a deep dive to answer this question. Can you tell us, Dr. Freud, do the animals dream and how do we know?
Yeah, so this is a timely question for me because a few weeks ago I watched my landlord's dog, and he's got this like those Kong things with the peanut butter in it, and he will lick that thing for hours and hours. And so when I was watching him, he would sleep in my bed, and at night, I could hear him doing that same licking when he was sleeping. He does it about 40 to 50% of the time that he sleeps. So anyway, in terms of wild animals, there have been some interesting discoveries in recent years. And researchers can't directly observe dreams. So like Susie said, they're looking for signs of sleep states that are similar to what we have when we dream. So REM sleep, they're looking for, twitching of limbs and rapid eye movements. That's where REM comes from. And they can actually also study brain patterns because when you're in REM sleep, you will have the same brain patterns as performing certain activities. So, like, for example, when a bird sings a song, parts of its brain fire off in different ways. And they've actually observed that while they sleep as well. And what they've learned about REM sleep is that certain species of animal have REM sleep, or what we, our form of REM sleep, I should say, um, whereas other ones do not. And then some have a state that's somewhere in between. So pigeons, octopi, mice, and even fruit flies, they have REM sleep, whereas crayfish, some species of frogs, jellyfish, pond snails, they don't. So we might be inclined to think, oh, it might be a brain thing. The bigger the brain or the more complex the brain, um, that leads to REM sleep. But actually, whales and dolphins, they actually have a different form of sleep where they turn off half of their brain at a time in order to sleep, and the other half stays awake. And they think that's so that they're alert at all times. And then in terms of the REM sleep, they think about it in similar ways that humans do in terms of the benefits. So if you had a Windows computer in the 90s or early 2000s, you'll remember disk defragmentation or defragging your hard drive. That's basically what REM sleep is. It's basically like reorganizing the files in your brain, deciding what you're going to keep, what you're going to leave, what's going in the long-term memory, what's going in the short-term memory. And that's what they think is happening with animals. So back to the original question, why do animals dream? Or sorry, not why do animals dream? Do animals dream? The answer is actually we don't know. So as humans, we know that we dream because we can tell each other, hey, I had these nonsensical hallucinations at night. And that's what we consider dreams, right? We can definitively say that animals exhibit patterns that resemble REM sleep, and that REM sleep is associated with dreams in humans. But we don't know if this is simply replaying memories, which we do know animals do replay memories in their head, or if they're actual dreams where they're, hallucinations and all the fun stuff that comes with that. And so it's possible, and personally, I think that we're not so different than humans aren't so different than animals as we think we are. Studies have shown that animals can even have insomnia and other conditions, such as male pattern baldness. Um, so yeah, answer is unclear and more research is needed.
Wow, Nate, I just got to say thank you for going on a deep dive on that. It's such a great answer. And now I'm really curious about what fruit flies might be dreaming. Maybe they're dreaming of like rotten bananas, like, oh, if only I had that rotten banana again, which is really cool. And Emily, thanks for sending us that fabulous question. All right. Oh, this is the turn the tables. Miles, do you want to explain our turn the tables and what's the winner gonna get?
Yeah. Okay. So this is actually a two-parter. So a question is going to appear related to this photo on the slide, and you can put your answers in the chat. I think we need a little countdown here.
All right, Miles, you count it down.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1,
All
and
right. All right, Phil.
oh,
All right. Oh wow, we need to go to Jeremy here to be the decider
What?
if Laura has this or if it's going to go to Liz.
All right.
So
Well,
yeah.
whoa, yeah, that's
Well, two
true.
parts, right? Two parts. So yes, indeed, a yellow-bellied sapsucker, which is a type of woodpecker, made the holes. So I guess guess Francie got that one. And the first correct tree answer that I saw, I guess is going to have to either be Laura or Liz, as it was a basswood tree, which is technically a linden. So I don't know, Jeremy, do you want to weigh in? And
Oh, Linden. Well,
does
that's
that
good.
work?
So it's American basswood, I'm assuming,
Yes,
Bill.
American basswood.
This is an incredibly hard tree to identify from its bark. So anyone who got that right is top notch as far as I'm concerned. It's a beautiful tree with that beautiful heart-shaped leaf and it is a linden. So European linden you may see on all sorts of streets all around the country. And yeah, I'm just amazed that anyone could get this species right.
So
Yeah,
Laura,
that was a tough one.
I'll put my email in the chat, and you can send me your address, and we'll send you one of our amazing beanies.
That's great. Thank you guys all for playing Turn the Tables. And wow, I did not get Linden or Bass. I didn't get it. I thought it was something completely different. So this is
I'll,
good learning chance for everybody.
I'll mention this was on a field trip that Brett and I were leading to the Hiroshi property that the Harris Center owns last week. So several of us got the advantage of seeing this tree in person. And I mean, seeing that little section of tree, I'm not, I'm not thinking I would know that either, but seeing the whole tree helped me identify it. So yeah, really good kudos to
And,
All
anybody
right.
who got
and
the basswood there.
Phil, didn't you say that sapsuckers
Mhm.
are partial to basswood trees? That was another
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
context clue for you.
sapsuckers absolutely seem to favor basswoods and apple trees in this area. They also seem to like maples and birches, and apparently up to 1,000 species of trees and plants have been pecked by sapsuckers.
I
Little
like
fact.
that. Opportunistic. All right, here's a great question. What species often grows like this and why? Trees in love? Anonymous. So, Jeremy, what's going on here? Are these trees in love or are they intertwined or are they dinosaur feet? What's up?
Well, they're certainly intertwined. I think probably characterizing it as love might go a little far. I just want to go back to the basswood a second because I remembered something. We don't have to go back to but it's a beautiful wood. It's a beautiful white wood, and it's fascinating. One of the early uses for it, or an early use in the last century, was for mink cages. If you take basswood and you cut it into a popsicle stick, for instance, it doesn't have any flavor, so it doesn't ruin the taste of the ice cream. Lots of tree species would have a flavor. Anyway, the mink in captivity hate wood that tastes for their cages, so they had to make mink cages out of basswood. It's very strange. Anyway, what species often grow like this? So these are two species that often grow like this. On the left is eastern hemlock, and on the right is yellow birch. And you can tell it's yellow birch because there's a little bit of shininess to that bark. It's hard from the image to see that it's probably sort of silvery rather than white, which would be a paper birch. And both of those species you'll often see on stilted roots like this. And so the question is, did they actually grow like this, or did something else change? And the answer is that something else changed, actually, that at some point there was a big stump here or a big log here, and both of those trees seeded onto that stump. I'm thinking it's a stump just because we don't see any remnants of a log. But if I don't know who, I guess it's anonymous, so we don't know who was there. Um, but both seeded into that and then grew. But what happens to a log or a stump over time? Well, it starts to decay and disappear, and finally gets to the point where that structure is no longer there, but now all the roots have been exposed that had to get down to soil from the top of the stump or from the top of the log. And these two species do this pretty commonly. Yellow birch in particular, you'll see this all the time. And in fact, many around here, many of them you can date back to the 38 hurricane, where there were lots of logs on the ground, and you'll see a line sometimes of yellow birch or even black birch. Black birch does this too quite frequently with these stilted roots, and the log may be long gone. Um, it's a challenge for trees to grow on this substrate. The benefit of growing on a log or or a stump is that you're up higher so that you've gained a competitive advantage. There aren't other tree seedlings there, so you're not competing against them. And then also, both these species have very teeny seeds. And if you have a teeny seed, you don't have a lot of energy in your seeds. So your root has to get into a pretty moist environment pretty quickly. And depending on the log or the stump, those tend to be relatively moist, although they can dry out. Through most seasons, they'll stay pretty wet. So it's a good competitive environment. It's a good environment for trees with very small seeds without that ability to drive a taproot deep into the soil. So yeah, you'll see this pretty commonly with yellow birch, with black birch, and then also with eastern hemlock.
Isn't a interspecies tree romance for Valentine's Day?
No.
Okay, just double checking. I do love it. Thanks for sharing that. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What is going on here from Quinn, all the way from Williamstown, Massachusetts, from this January? Wow, Brett, this looks like something for you. And I wish I knew what you call a bundle of salamanders. Do they have a name?
You know, the spring, when this happens in the spring with spotted salamanders, they call it congressing, but that's really a courtship thing. So I don't know if there's a name for this particular behavior that happens in the winter. Um, so these are eastern newts, adult eastern newts, which is the salamander you see most commonly swimming in lakes or ponds or beaver wetlands. And you know, amphibians have all kinds of ingenious strategies for surviving winter, and different species employ different strategies and overwinter in different places. So some, for instance, overwinter underground. Newts typically overwinter in lakes and ponds, underwater, and um, they, you know, we tend to think of like the hardest thing about winter maybe being the cold. And so that is a challenge. And what the way that they deal with that is they slow their metabolism way, way down so that they don't move around a lot. That's in relationship, I'm sure, to the temperatures around them because they're ectotherms. So their temperature mirrors that of their environment. So the water's cold, the newts are cold. They're not doing much most of the time in the winter. But if you think about a beaver wetland or a small pond, the other challenge there is that they freeze. So ice covers those ponds, um, and newts have lungs. So for them, even bigger than the challenge of the cold is the challenge of oxygen. And how are they going to get all the oxygen they need? They don't need as much as they normally do in the warmer weather because their metabolism is really, really slow. And like many amphibians, they can absorb some oxygen through their porous skin. But if it's been iced over for a long time, sometimes that's not quite enough. And so they might congregate like this in places where there's a hole. I know that this picture was taken near a hole in the ice. And so they'll congregate in places where they can swim up to get air, or where a seep or a stream might be entering a pond and bringing more highly oxygenated water with it so that they can have better access to oxygen, either through that hole in the ice, which is probably why they're all really close together trying to get up there, or also possibly through the influx of water that has more oxygen in it. And I sent this picture to my friend Jim Andrews, who runs the Vermont Reptile and Amphibian Atlas, and he said he occasionally gets reports just like this from time to time, but not that often. And then in doing my research, I sent this to Miles to include in the slideshow because this picture is so wild. This is from a blog post by the Orion Society, which is a society for the study of reptiles and amphibians. And they did a whole post on how, which I can put in the chat, on how different turtles and salamanders and frogs and snakes survive the winter. And so they were talking about this phenomenon with newts, and that this was a picture that someone sent to them. The challenge here is that if the area where they're coming for their oxygen, if it gets really cold really fast, they can freeze to death. And I think that sadly is what is happening or has happened in this picture. So they have to go there for air, but they also have to take care not to become too exposed if the water draws down or they can't escape. So it's a pretty wild thing to see. And I love that picture. I particularly love the underwater picture that Quinn took and shared with us, because that's just really amazing to see them all together there like that, and just a beautiful shot. And I really appreciate that he was willing to put his phone in the water to get that picture, because not everybody would be. So thanks for sharing that.
Thanks, Brett. And strangely enough, your answer reminded me of something about muskrats, which is that because there's so many muskrats piled up in this tiny little muskrat lodge, by the end of the winter, the muskrat lodge it gets too much carbon dioxide in it. They too much breathing, and so they are not able to dive under the water and stay underwater as long as usual. And so they end up using, this is no joke, muskrats are no joke. When they're when they're in their little lodge, they make these channels that are close to the top of the water, and they make air bubbles. And the air bubbles, you can see them, they kind of get a little bit frozen. And when they need a little extra air, they come up and take an air bubble down in their mouth with them to extend their dive. I know, what? Crazy. Anyway, this is our last question. True, Miles? Yes. Okay. Who is this? And why is this hawk here in January? From Francie in Harrisville. All right, bird guys. Where's Nate and Phil? What do you got for us? How can you answer this question about this raptor?
Well, I guess I'll turn it back to the audience, see if anybody has a guess here that that is what I think is the right answer.
Is this an
Um,
unauthorized turn the tables, Phil?
Yep.
Okay.
Putting it
Put your
back to everybody
answers.
else. Let's see what we got.
Maybe if we get the right answer, they can
Uh-huh.
get a
Yep.
bandana.
Not seeing it yet.
Miles, can they get a bandana if they get the right answer?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh boy.
All right, there's a bandana on stake.
Oh, I still haven't seen it.
We need another countdown though.
Okay.
Okay.
5,
5.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh, the
Looks like
bandanas are safe.
okay. All right, Phil, who is this fella?
So I'm gonna call this one a red-shouldered hawk. What do you think, Nate? Are you on board with that?
That sounds good to me. The really bulky sort of structure to this hawk, the relatively short tail, that all indicates buteo to me. And maybe you can go into the characteristics that'll separate it from the other common buteos.
Yeah, sure. I'm guessing it's a winter shot. Why is it here in January? So first off, we have three major buteos, which are the red-tailed hawk, red-shouldered hawk, and broad-winged hawk. Basically, three of them inhabit our area at some point throughout the year. Broad-winged hawks all migrate out of here, very famously moving in big numbers over Pac-Man-Adnock and other hawk watch sites down the mountains. They're gone by October, basically. Um, really, no, there's never been an overwintering record of a broad-winged hawk, so they're gone. They would be streakier overall, brownish stripes on the front, but also small and compact with a shorter tail. Um, so eliminating this from the Cooper's hawk and the sharp-shinned hawk, sometimes it helps to have something to compare to. We don't really with one photo, but if you saw a Cooper's or a sharp-shinned hawk, it would have an extremely long tail, maybe about the length of the body itself. So this is noticeably shorter than that. It has that bulky body, like Nate said. So it really just leaves red-tailed and red-shouldered hawk as possibilities. And the best field mark on a red-tailed hawk, just about every red-tailed hawk has a belly band or a brown belt going across the middle of the very white underside. This bird has more coloration on the upper chest and white underneath rather than a brown belt bisecting the white. So that hints at maybe a young red-shouldered hawk coming into its first year adult plumage, going into its second year, I should say. And there's also a little bit of a hint of white and black on the wings. I'm seeing like the primaries there. So there's some contrasting, and that to me suggests red-shouldered as well as that striped tail, like Nate mentioned, contrasting black and white tail bands. It's a raptor because it has a short, kind of hooked bill. If you'd be able to see that a little closer, just the very upright body shape, perched on a wire. That's another thing, perching on a wire versus perching on a pole. I don't really see red-tailed hawks perch on wires too often. Usually see them on poles or trees. Red-shouldered hawks are a little smaller. They have smaller feet, and they end up feeding in people's backyards. But why are they here in January? That's a great question. Fancy saw this in Harrisville in January, which is it's still a pretty unusual winter sighting, but red-shouldered hawks are becoming more of a regular winter bird somewhere in the Monadnock region throughout the winter now. So they're expanding their winter population, or maybe fewer of them are departing south. This is a bird that nests in our area. They usually arrive by mid to late March and are underway with nesting by May. They stick around until October or November when they migrate out, and we see about 200 on average at Pac Monadnock every fall. But yeah, more and more as climate change takes hold, and as winters are traditionally a little bit warmer, maybe not this winter, red-shouldered hawks aren't leaving in the same numbers, and we're starting to see them in the ones and twos on our Christmas bird counts and other winter surveys. So yeah, I think they're going to be one that's only increasing in future winters in our area, and perhaps a bird that's expanding its breeding population too. Do they eat chickens? Um, Maybe, but I don't know that for sure. I think of them eating smaller prey around bird feeders, rodents and small birds mainly. I don't know, Nate, do you have anything more about red-shouldered hawks since you spent a lot of time in their winter habitat?
I think they can eat chickens and they will, but they're definitely not their preferred prey items. I think, like you said, they tend to go for the smaller mammals and things like that. Red-shouldered hawks, in comparison to the size of a chicken, they can be similar in size depending on the size of the chicken. So that's not really something they want to tussle with if they can avoid it. But I think they have been recorded to take chickens from time to time. Yeah.
At least bantams, right? Little
I don't
bantam
know my
chickens.
chickens. I'm sorry.
As long as they don't take muskrats, I'm okay with that.
Oh, I don't know.
Got muskrat fever. All right. Wow. Well, thank you guys. Thanks for joining us this evening. And thanks for all of you who sent in your questions. And I want to encourage all of you to keep sending your questions in. We're going to have another Ask a Naturalist, and we can start collecting them now. So if you come across a natural history mystery that you really want to know an answer to, take a photograph, record a sound, those kinds of things, and send it our way. And thank you. We hope to see you at many other Harris Center events, and we wish you all a very safe, happy season, and muskrat love to all of you. Don't forget to check it out, Captain and Janelle. Muskrat Susie.